Hi, this is Diane, and welcome to DMD Digest. Today we're going to talk about some things that if you have GI disorders, any type of gastrointestinal distress, you probably suffer from a lot of gassy experiences. And although that may not be such a pleasant thing to talk about all the time, it happens. And so today we're here to talk about what's causing it, why, what do I do, is this normal, is it not? So hopefully I can answer a few questions. For one, a lot of the popular diets and things that people are on right now, such as keto or paleo, high protein diets are great to an extent, but they also can produce a lot of intestinal gas. And no one likes to have to deal with that, especially if you're a pretty active individual or you're out in the public a lot, you're working or whatever. Great to maybe feel better, look better, might be losing weight, but you're gassy, and so then what? So there's a few things that are contributing to the gas that is being created. One thing I mentioned is high protein diets, high protein foods, and that even includes protein bars, protein supplements, protein drinks, any protein. Some of the culprits are diets that are really high in red meat, such as beef, but meat in general. So unfortunately, chicken, fish, turkey, beef, pork, even non-meat sources such as beans and legumes and certain grains can also be very gas producing, and even different vegetables. Some of you already know that some of the vegetables that fall under the cruciferous type, which are like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbages, those are all known to create more gas. Dairy products will also create more gas. One thing that you can look for is getting lactose-free dairy products, and that can help a lot. But one of the reasons what happens is when we eat those foods or drink them as a beverage, there's nitrogen that builds up in your intestine. And then you have your good intestinal bacteria that is in there that I've talked about and mentioned in the past. And once those start getting involved, then they produce sulfur. And that is the foul-smelling part of the gas that we all dislike. So, as I said, the more you consume of those types of foods and drinks, the more gas you're going to have. Another thing is looking at, well, what can I do to help it? And there's a few things. For one, chewing your food slower can help. Drinking more water can help. Trying to watch how quick you are eating, chewing, and swallowing. So by slowing that down, that can help matters. Make sure you chew your food very thoroughly. Another thing that you can do is use a straw when you're drinking. Straws tend to produce or allow us to take in less gas. Some of us are very quick or very nervous eaters, and you're actually swallowing a lot of air when you eat. So you might notice shortly after you eat or drink something, you're belching a lot. And that's because you're swallowing too much air. It's getting trapped. Some other items that can create more gas that I kind of left behind that I forgot to, certain herbs and spices, onions, garlic, high sugar diets. And we're coming into to Halloween if you're watching this toward the latter part of October. So, sometimes we buy the candy to pass out. Sometimes we eat all that candy. Other times we go through our kids' Halloween baskets and pick out all those things that we just don't think they're going to want, or we hope they didn't notice that we're in their baskets and we're going to take them out anyway. But foods that are really high, predominantly in refined sugars, can also produce quite a bit of gas. Certain grains can produce a lot of gas, and I think I mentioned legumes in the past as well, like peas, beans, those type of things. Artificial sweeteners, since I was mentioning the sugars, artificial sweeteners in any, unfortunately now we have a lot of like low calorie, unsweetened, things like that. But even in sugarless candies, gums, a lot of times there's mannitol, sorbitol, xylitol. Any of those things are actually alcohol sugars. And they can, for some people, they can just downright give you diarrhea. But for other people, it's the really uncomfortable gas. And then once again, the foul smell to it. So be cognizant of all of those things as well. I mentioned drinking enough water, maybe using a straw, chewing your food slowly. Another thing to look at is making sure that you're trying to get some exercise, even if it's walking, but that will help to move everything through. You might notice that while you are moving and you're a little bit more active, you might be passing more gas. That could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. If it's really, really smelly and nasty, the people around you are not going to appreciate that, but it's coming out, you're going to feel better. Another thing that you can do is kind of look at, well, how much protein should I even be consuming? And there's a guide to kind of give you an estimate of about how many grams of things you should be eating. And this would be based on what you want your weight to be or what your ideal body weight is. So a calculation to look at would be taking your body weight in pounds, and then you multiply that by 0.36. And then that should give you roughly about how many grams you would need of protein. And again, we're kind of in this era right now where everyone is thinking high protein, everything needs to be high protein, so I lose weight and gain muscle mass and all of that. And as I said, those diets can be okay. You don't want to do that long term though. You can actually overdo protein, especially if you're not like extremely active on a daily basis. So when you have too much protein, it can kind of throw your body off. It can make it harder for your kidneys to work and clear some of that extra protein out. Another thing you have to look at is the more protein you're eating, likely the less carbohydrate you're eating, which means you could also become more constipated because of that. So it kind of tends to start to backfire, because then the more constipated you become, then the more stool that you have in your intestine, which means the longer that food's going to sit there, and then that means that's going to start fermenting, and then we're going to grow or develop even more bacteria, which is going to create more gas, which is going to create more complications. So there's this constantly, I feel like, this fine line, and I find myself struggling with this all the time as well. So it's like, well, how much is too much? What's not enough? Where do I find that happy medium? Am I, drinking too much fluid and now I'm like so full I don't want to eat anything? Or, where do I go from here? And I think that's something that we all just have to kind of figure out ourselves and kind of figure out where do I feel comfortable at, as far as how much protein am I eating, how much water, where do I go from here? So once again, I think that's something, I don't think there is a distinct number. And once again, it's not wise to just make sure that everything that you're eating is high protein. So you want a happy medium in there. And as I said before, too much protein, you're going to end up still super gassy and likely constipated. And then we have a whole nother issue. So a couple other things that you can do. There are some over-the-counter options that you can look at that are helpful. One of them, besides looking at maybe lactose-free dairy, which I mentioned before, but another option would be a product called Beano. And you can get it over the counter anywhere. It's bean, like a green bean, Beano. And you can get it in like with the antacids and things like that. But it actually just kind of helps to break down some of the gas-producing chemicals, if you will, that are in some of the foods. Another option would be like Gas X, which is just brand name, but it's simethicone is the actual drug that's in there. And that can help quite a bit as well, just trying to break the gas bubbles down, make it a little bit easier to pass. Another option, if you want to go more herbal, would be sipping on peppermint tea or ginger. You could do ginger tea. You can actually just buy the root of ginger and wash it well. You kind of use like a vegetable peeler and peel away the outer layer, but you can like get into the next layer, kind of like if you're peeling an apple or a carrot, and the inside layer you can chew on. Now, if you've never ever chewed on real fresh ginger, it can burn. So it's definitely sharp, peppery, kind of very stringent taste, and a lot of people can't even do it because it's really, really potent. I do find kind of on the downside, if you have a lot of heartburn or as I've spoken about in prior videos, the like GERD type of symptoms with the burning esophagus and heartburn, acid reflux kind of stuff happening. A lot of remedies for that are actual ginger and peppermint. Some of us out there find that those actually worsen that sensation of the heartburn. So you're going to have to experiment. But those are two options to consider. Something else to consider is licorice root. Not the candy licorice, but this would be the herbal licorice root. And they make that. You can steep and make it as a tea as well. And that is not, isn't as like strong or burning in your throat. So those would be some considerations, like options to try to use to treat some things and just kind of like soothe your tummy and make it feel better. Heating pads work well too if you're in a bind. So hopefully some of this information was helpful to you. When I talk next about this, we're going to focus on some actual protein powders, whey-based versus plant protein powders and supplements and bars, and looking at what are the options there, what's better, and how we can use those best. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you've learned a little bit more and we can address some of those tummy troubles. Thank you.